Okay, it's the WAOK Morning Show, and we are back. Before I introduce you to our special guest this morning, I want to give away a 4-pack of tickets to the Atlanta Jerk Festival, which happens on Sunday, September 1st. And let's take caller number 2 to 404-726-1380. Give us a call, and you got the tickets. So this morning, I've been telling you that we had a special guest, so allow me to introduce Temidayo Aganga-Williams. He is a partner at Selendi Gay PLLC, a litigation firm based in New York City, and brings his strong government credentials to his representation of clients facing complex government enforcement actions, internal investigations, congressional oversight, and high-stakes civil litigation. Prior to joining Selendi Gay, Temidayo served as the Senior Investigative Counsel for the House Select Committee to investigate the January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol. As a Senior Investigative Counsel, he was responsible for investigating the facts, circumstances, and causes of the attack and issues relating to the peaceful transfer of power. Before that, Temidayo was an assistant U.S. attorney in the criminal division of the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Eastern District of New York and investigated, prosecuted, and tried complex and sensitive cases across a wide spectrum of subject matters. Prior to his years in public service, Temidayo was a litigation associate at Cleary, Gottlieb, Steen and Hamilton, LLC, a leading international law firm. Good morning, Temidayo Aganga-Williams, and thank you for joining us on WAOK this morning.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. We are delighted to have you and been looking forward to talking to you this morning. So let's get started. So the committee's investigation of Donald Trump yielded a 4-count indictment in which he pled not guilty to all 4 counts. And after all that you learned throughout the investigation, I'm sure you 100% expected that plea. So you must find it absolutely laughable given all that the committee learned.
I'll say this. The investigation we did on the January 6th committee was so unique because the public got to see us basically present our evidence through a trial. And those trials were the public hearings that we had in the summer. So I think the fact that the former president pled guilty, he has his rights to defend himself and his rights to put on, that's a constitutional right that should be protected. But I think the public is in a unique position to judge this case before it ever sees a courtroom because they've seen already the evidence that's stacked up against them.
Yes. So what fact or evidence did you have that showed Trump planned all along to steal the election if he did not win?
Well, I think the beauty of our investigation is that, there really just wasn't one fact. There was a mountain of evidence.
Mm-hmm.
And what it showed is that even prior to the election, that Trump was thinking about what would happen if he lost and how he would lie to the American people that he had won. And after the election, the campaign really kicked into high gear, a mass effort to confuse the public about what happened on election day. And that's even before the results that President Biden had won. They were already looking to confuse the American public. And in the months that came after that, prior to January 6th, there was what we could really talk about as a political coup. This was not a plan that was all about violence. It was a plan that was about manipulating the political structure of the United States, from the U.S. Congress to state legislators to the Department of Justice. He pulled on each of those levers, trying to find a way to use official power to impact the transfer of power. He failed. And because he failed in all those political ways, that's how you see the outburst of violence at the Capitol on the 6th as really the last attempt of a failed campaign to overturn the election.
Wow. So how many members were on the committee with you?
So the committee that we worked on was a little unique in that the entire committee was staffed just for the purpose of this investigation. That's why it was called a select committee as opposed to a standing committee. And there were about 25 lawyers. And of those lawyers, about probably 14 or 15 of us were former federal prosecutors. And the other lawyers were more focused on either specific expertise or they had previously worked in Congress and were more on the congressional side of things. And we worked under the U.S. Congress, the members that were the more public-facing part of the investigation. So that would be Liz Cheney, for example, and Congressman Benny Thompson, who were our bosses and we gave directions from and treated as our clients.
Okay. So, aside from Trump's televised invitation requesting his supporters to meet him at the Capitol, what would you say you found as the most damning piece of evidence against Trump, which would lead to a criminal conviction?
Well, I think really, in a criminal conviction, you're always looking to prove someone's state of mind. That's the most difficult and important part as a prosecutor. How do you take the jury inside what somebody was thinking at the time that you say they committed the crime? And here, I think the pieces of evidence I think are most damning are that Trump never thought he won the election. He knew he lost the election. He acknowledged it in private. And I think that dovetails right into the fact that, as we call it, it was all a big lie. He knew he was lying. This is not a case of someone who was confused, someone who had bad intelligence, someone who may have meant well but was factually wrong. He knew he was lying. He knew it wasn't true, and he did it regardless. And there are multiple pieces of evidence that demonstrate that. For example, he tried to get the Department of Justice to launch an investigation that he knew was baseless because his own senior members of the DOJ had told him that they couldn't find any fraud that impacted the election. But he told them in one meeting, he said, basically, you all just say there was fraud, and me and the U.S. Congressmen, the Republicans, will take it from here, right? So he understood that he needed some official endorsement of a fraud claim, whether it came from legislators, whether it came from the executive branch, the Department of Justice, but that he could then convince the public to go along with him regardless. So I think that is what's most damning, is that he had that guilty state of mind.
Wow. And would you say that that was what the select committee also agreed? What was most damning about this? The committee as a whole?
I think the committee as a whole, it's tough to say that the committee had one piece of evidence that was most damning because, each member of the committee, all the lawyers,
Mm-hmm.
we all came from different perspectives, different backgrounds, even though similar career tracks at times. But different people, I would say, were impacted by seeing different parts of evidence because depending on how you as an individual approach the investigation and what happened in January 6th and before, I think you might have found different parts of our evidentiary scheme more appealing. And I think that's the same thing for people who watch the hearings. For some people, the violence was really jarring. For some people, it was the fact that the former president watched the attack and did nothing and didn't care that after he was told they were trying to kill Mike Pence. I think everyone has different parts that really triggered them, and I think I think it's tough to say for everyone what
Mm-hmm.
that piece of evidence was.
Wow. Okay. Well, we're going to go to break. We'll be right back. Can you stay with us?
Of course.
Yes. Okay. Well, we'll be right back on the other side. We got some more questions for you. Hold on. Temidayo, do you believe that there's going to be any way that Trump will be able to wiggle his way out of facing trial for these actions?
Well, I would say so far he's been pretty successful with that. I mean,
Yeah.
he has, by really relying on some of the, I think, shortcomings of our legal system, or perhaps some ways to manipulate it, he has so far avoided responsibility in any case to do with January 6th. And I think with the question of whether he will, I think ultimately avoid responsibility, frankly, I think comes down to the election. I think the first verdict, in a sense, that's going to be rendered is by the American public. And after that, and only after that, is there opportunity for him to face justice.
And speaking of the election, given all that you learned about Trump through the investigation, how do you personally feel about him having the right to run again for president and actually be a strong contender, given all the work that you did to uncover what he did on January 6th? What are your personal feelings about that?
I think as far as whether he should have the right to run, I mean, I don't know that I would say, I don't think that in probably inherently getting convicted of a felony should mean you can't run. I think that the American people should have the option to vote for who they want to vote for. Um, and I think what is more problematic to me is not that he's able to run, but that he has such a wide base of support. So I think it's there should be some things like not encouraging people to take arms against their own country or people trying to subvert a democratic will of the people. I think those things should make him not eligible in the minds of American people. I think that's what's so shocking is that for so many people who I think of themselves as loving their country, they're willing to support someone who went against his country and put himself above country, which I think should make you not eligible to be president.
Hmm. Did the committee uncover any information at all about the makings of Project 2025? I know that that was not a part of what the investigation was, but did you uncover anything about the makings of what was happening with Project 2025 throughout your investigation?
No, we did not, and and our focus was not really was not at all on what policies Trump sought to implement. I
Right.
mean, the committee really approached this in a bipartisan way and a nonpartisan way. So we took great care to not touch the political component. So we were not interested in what Trump was going to do or not do if
Hmm.
he had won re-election. But I think that's what makes our investigation so strong and independent and really protected from criticism because we were not politically influenced or biased in any way.
Okay. What is one thing that you know about Trump that you can share that we most likely do not know?
I mean, I don't know that I know something specifically that you all may not know. I mean, so much of this is public, and I think that's what makes all of this so scary,
Hmm.
is that I think we're all so used to the idea of secrets and investigations, and we're used to that when powerful people get caught doing something wrong, there's going to be this hidden tape that comes out where you hear them confess, or it's going to be that there's always one piece of evidence. And I think what's happened in the Trump era is that we have so much evidence. We have so much that is public. We have so much that was said on television right in front of our eyes. We have
Hmm.
so much that he admits to on live television that I don't know that our political brains are able to understand and interpret it accurately because we're so not used to it. We don't know what it's like to just watch crimes and admissions day in and day out, and to we don't know what it's like to watch, a mass attack on the government and it's on television as if it was a primetime TV show.
I
So I
know.
think that is the thing that we're often looking for a secret, and sometimes it is plainly in front of us. And I think that's what you can see with Trump and everything that happened, not only on January 6th, but the months that happened prior. The lies were in public too. I mean, and there are things that were secret. I don't want to suggest everything happened in public, but all of this, turning against your own country, we saw it with our own eyes
Yeah.
together. And I think we have to believe what we saw because we were all there.
Yeah, absolutely. What, in your opinion, made this congressional investigation unlike any other that has most likely ever been done? Maybe that, the fact that it
Well,
was on TV, huh?
yeah, well, I think we did our hearings completely different, right? Most congressional hearings are a lot more boring and stale, question answer. Everyone gives a 5-minute speech. Because the committee was unified, it was able to present a hearing like it was for television. I mean, the committee actually brought in the former head of ABC to lead a production team to really treat the hearings like not like a congressional hearing, but as entertainment. And how do you keep people engrossed in watching and coming back wanting more? So I think
Hmm.
that's a huge difference of something we did. And I think what made our committee so unique, we used to say there was the secret hero of the committee was Kevin McCarthy, the Republican who was the former speaker. But at that point, when the committee was formed, Pelosi was the speaker.
Hmm.
And why he's the secret hero of the committee is that when Nancy Pelosi said, okay, you can have your members on the committee, but I just don't want, I think there were two specific members that Nancy Pelosi said, folks who had come out publicly and said they didn't believe what happened on the 6th, they showed they were biased. She says, pick anyone, but not those two. And Kevin McCarthy decided he wasn't going to put any Republicans on. They were going to boycott fully. why that mattered so much is that Nancy Pelosi took the two Republicans and only two that said they would serve on that side. That's Adam Kinzinger and Liz Cheney, who was the vice chair.
Mm-hmm.
And why that mattered so much is that the committee had people who all believed in the mission and got to act with one voice. And a regular committee, every other committee in the world, everything is voted on. Republicans may agree, Democrats may not agree, but they don't act as one voice on everything. Instead, we got to act as one voice for every subpoena that was issued, for the order of every hearing, for every investigative action we took. And what that meant is that when you watched it on television, there was no disagreement.
Mm-hmm.
There were no objections. There were no political fighting because the committee, and perhaps the only high-profile committee ever,
Mm-hmm.
operated in complete unison, which is what made our work come out so strong.
Yeah. So how do you feel about being such a significant part of American history? I mean, your name is going to be in history books for generations to come. Did you ever imagine that you would be a part of something this significant?
I can't say that I imagined it. I'm grateful that I got to have the opportunity. I think part of what the committee was fighting for was in defense of, no, the whole core of the committee's work was in defense of this country and defense of how to make this country a place that all votes count, which is, at its core, Trump was trying to stop people's votes from counting. People who came, especially from majority Black areas or significant Black populations, that's what he was focused on, throwing out those votes. And I think what I feel especially proud of, coming not only, I'm Black, but I'm also an immigrant, is that I got to be part of that fight and doing my small part, I think, to defend the country and to show, in defense of what's right. And one of the kind of untold stories of the committee is how diverse the actual committee was. I mean, it's, I would say, the most diverse place I've worked. It was led significantly by not only people of color, but also women. And I think that when you look at the committee, and one day if that story is ever told, you see that it was an incredibly diverse group of people who came to DC from across the country, who left their families, who left their jobs, and really committed themselves for a year and a half to tell the story of what happened before and on January 6th. And I think that makes me optimistic about the kind of country we can be, because you can see at who stood up and also made this committee successful.
Yeah. Wow. Well, thank you so much for all of the work that you put into it. If you can stay for another few minutes, we got a couple of callers who'd like to speak to you. Can you stay with us for a few minutes?
Yeah, that's good.
All right, great. Susan Talk 1380 WAOK. You are listening to the WAOK Morning Show, and I am Angela Green, joined by Temidayo Aganga-Williams, who is our special guest this morning. And I just want to say, you know what? I thank you for all of the work that you did. I know that was a lot of hard work. And I know that you probably had a lot of days when you were just shaking your head, and some days when you probably went home with a mammoth headache. But I want you to know that I watched every second of the hearings when they were on TV. So whoever it was from ABC that worked with you all and trying to, make this entertaining and make it engaging so that people will want to watch, I was definitely one of those who watched. And I was so intrigued by what you uncovered. And like you said, so much of it was already out there. I mean, the text messages, the tweets that, we knew that he did. And of course, being on TV, inviting people to come to the Capitol. So much of it, like you said, was kind of right there in your face. But just to be able to talk to somebody who actually worked on that is just, I'm really grateful for this opportunity to speak with you this morning. So thank you again for joining us. So we have a caller for you. Her name is Tea Party Lou, and she has a question for you.
Good morning, and thank you for taking my call. My question concerns the Secret Service detail of Kamala Harris, because we saw, July 13th that the Secret Service was either totally incompetent or people.
Tea Party Lou, is your question for me or is it for the guest?
It's for the guest. So I look at Kamala Harris, the Secret Service detail on January 6th. We learned in the public, we learned January of 24 that she was actually at the DNC where the pipe bomb was. And we learned January of this year that the Secret Service was sitting outside the DNC. Supposedly they had done 2 sweeps of the building, outside the building beforehand. And we're told that a pipe bomb was placed at 7 o'clock the night before. Yet on January 6th, we've seen videos where a plainclothes Capitol police officer went up to their van or their SUV that was parked out front and told them about the pipe bomb. And they sit in their SUVs for 5 minutes before they go and get Kamala out of the building. There were children that walked past on the sidewalk past the pipe bomb. And
what's your question, Tea Party?
Did you look at the Secret Service detail? Were they totally inept, or were they part of, a lot of people suggest, a false flag operation, because they seem to be sitting in their vehicles for 5 minutes before they did anything to protect Kamala Harris on January 6th. And then recently, just in the last 2 weeks, we've seen another video.
Hold on, Tea Party. Give him a chance to answer the question that you asked. Temidayo?
Sure. Thanks for the question. I don't have a good answer there because that's really outside the scope of what our mandate. The pipe bomb situation at DNC has not formally been connected to the attempts to overturn the election, which is what our mandate is. That what were the efforts to disrupt the transfer of power? Other events that happened on the 6th, like that pipe bomb, were not within the scope of our mandate. So frankly, it's not something that was at the core of what we looked at. So I don't have further information or position either way as to what kind of security failings happened that day. So,
right.
I mean, because a lot of people think the pipe bomb was stopped 20 minutes before. It was supposed to go off at the time that Congress was starting to look at certifying the votes. A lot of people, what they believe and what they've never had answered is, we believe that what Congress wanted, what Nancy Pelosi and Mitch McConnell wanted, was to not look at fraud in various swing states, because we know we had senators and congressmen who were going to object and have a 3-hour discussion on each state.
Okay,
so
I'm sorry, Tea Party, I'm sorry. As he said, that was beyond the scope of what he was doing, so he cannot answer any question about what you're talking about. I think he's answered to the best of his ability.
And here's one thing I will say to respond to some of the comments at the end about some people saying that Nancy Pelosi and Mitch McConnell wanted a certain end. I don't know who said it, but they're not informed, and that's just factually wrong. There's zero evidence of Nancy Pelosi being involved in any effort to disrupt or stop the transfer of power or otherwise impact or stop even people from objecting. People did object. If you recall, after what the evidence showed is that during the attack, former President Trump did nothing. He watched the attack, which involved an officer losing his life and multiple people going to the hospital and hundreds of officers injured. He watched. He did nothing for 187 minutes. He watched the Capitol get destroyed. He was told that they were trying to kill Mike Pence. And he said something to the effect of, I guess they're more upset than he is at what happened. And he was fine with them going to kill Mike Pence. And what happened during that is that he didn't call any leaders, the Department of Justice, the Department of Defense, all of those folks. No one got a call from Trump. No one, even Mike Pence, who was under siege, was calling leaders across the government for them to send reinforcements and send help. Trump called no one. And on top of that, after the attack was going on, what Trump and Giuliani and others were doing was trying to exploit the attack on the Capitol while it was happening. We also have a video that we showed for the first time of what Nancy Pelosi was doing, which she was with congressional leaders, and Nancy Pelosi was calling folks, trying to get help and reinforcement. And Nancy Pelosi was actually going into high gear and showing leadership. So the idea there was coordination by Nancy Pelosi and Mitch McConnell to do anything to impact the transfer of power, that's wrong. And what I'll add lastly is that even after the attack happened, Republican members of Congress still objected. If you remember, they didn't go back into session and then just now certify the election. After there was always almost the mass murder of sitting legislators, Republicans still objected. And Trump, even after the attack was officers who had the high road and were fighting back. Trump and Giuliani were still making phone calls, trying to build support to stop the transfer of power and exploit it. And we have video that we showed of Nancy Pelosi trying to stop that. So I think it's wrong to suggest that somehow Pelosi was involved in obstructing the transfer of power, but instead others, including Republicans, were trying to stop Trump, who was exploiting violence to subvert the will of the people.
Wow. Thank you for that. James in Atlanta.
Yes, Angela. Regarding the, during that period of time we were coming out of the pandemic, some parts of the country were still on lockdown. The Capitol was locked down, and the public was not allowed into the Capitol. Yet days before January 6th, it was seen on video that members of the Congress was showing people around the Capitol, possibly some insurrectionists. Was that investigated? Were there connections?
Sure, happy to answer that. So that was investigated, and I think what folks have to understand is even if when the public is not necessarily the Capitol is never just fully open to the public, and even when the Capitol perhaps can be close to the public, members can still take individuals into the Capitol and groups into the Capitol. And there's not those individuals are not tracked person by person. So, for example, when I worked in Congress for the committee, if I brought in people to the committee, there's no tracking on an individual basis who my guests are that I would have access to bring them in. You basically make it through security, and you can walk around the Capitol. It is an open building in that sense. So we did consider whether or not some of those rumors were true as to whether people came prior. We didn't find evidence to substantiate that, but that is something that we looked at. But I will say it wasn't a firm conclusion either way, because frankly, logistically very difficult to figure out who's in the Capitol at any single time of the day.
So what about the certain officers were not labeled, such as Nancy Pelosi and also Jim Clyburn? The officers were not labeled, but yet still they were found by the insurrectionists. Was that also investigated?
That is something that we looked at, is how people, whether there was efforts prior to the attack to understand the scope of the building and whatnot. But I think what is tough is that the building it's a public building. If you work in Congress or you've been to Congress as a visitor, you can find out where different buildings are, where the speaker sits. We do have access to this building as citizens. So we didn't find evidence to suggest that there were a coordinated attack that had folks who came and scattered out the building prior. But that's something that if there's more evidence there, I'm sure a future committee can look at.
All right, thank you so much for that. So, do you have time for one more question, Temidayo? We got one more person that's holding. You do? Okay, well, we'll be right back. News and Talk, 1380 WAOK. News and Talk WAOK. It's the WAOK Morning Show, and we are back with our special guest, Temidayo Aganga-Williams, Senior Investigative Counsel for the House Select Committee to investigate the January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol. And we have Love from Bankhead on the line. Love?
Good morning.
Good morning.
Did I hear the guest say that he was a prosecutor?
Yes.
Okay, I have a question for him. Okay, I'm going to just paint a scenario. If I send said people to a building to do some type of, let's say, steal something, and in the process, somebody gets killed, do I get charged with the killing as me being the person that sent the people?
I'll say at a high level one, it's always tough to say whether a statute would apply. I mean, there is a concept in the law, whether it's in federal law called Pinkerton liability, and there's something called felony murder, where you can be charged with a crime if you basically engaged in a felony and someone dies in a foreseeable way. So the way you usually see that is someone goes in to engage in a burglary with a gun and then you end up shooting someone even by mistake, that's a foreseeable thing from a gun burglary. You could be charged with murder. And sometimes if you're the getaway driver, for example, in that same example, and someone inside gets killed and you're waiting outside to drive the person with the gun away, you could potentially face a murder charge. So that's a general criminal law idea.
Okay, like I was saying, okay, so if I say I orchestrated something and it was found out that I was the person who orchestrated the crime, and then that period of orchestration or that crime during the timeline of the crime, somebody was killed, but it is very well known that I didn't do it, but I was the person that orchestrated it. Do I get charged with it?
I mean, I guess I just see where this is going. You're asking if someone died in the Capitol, why doesn't former President Trump face murder potential charges or something of the sort? Is that right? Is that the question?
Precisely.
Yeah. It's a very complicated process as to what is foreseeable and what's not, and whether. And I understand. Listen, multiple people died related to the 6th. Someone died the day of. Somebody else was trying to break through a window, was shot and killed. Officers died after the 6th. So I do think that any law enforcement, the Department of Justice, I'm sure, considered all viable options. They chose the charges they chose. I don't know, based on the evidence that I've seen, I don't take issue with them not trying to seek different charges. The charges filed, I think, are supported by the evidence, makes sense. As to whether or not there should have been a murder charge, that's not the evidence that I've seen. I don't think that you would amount to that. I think that would be a stretch. But I also understand that, when people die in a preventable way and people die, frankly, based on lies, and the attacks that led to the deaths here were based on lies, and lies that Trump knew were lies, that his senior members of his campaign and his own administration told him were lies. I do think there needs to be responsibility, even if it's not criminal. I think that former President Trump should face political responsibility that his actions, at least indirectly, led to multiple people dying who didn't have to die, and it was based upon a lie.
And one last question. We do have footage seeing that there were, Capitol Police escorting people into the Capitol, opening up the gates and letting the people in. Are they going to be charged as well?
I think 2 points on that. I think the Capitol was overrun from different directions, and there was a full, basically armed battle between officers and the rioters, the insurrectionists. I think what also happened in certain parts of the Capitol is that they were in fact overrun. So there were, not every place ended up in direct hand-to-hand combat. So I think the footage you see of some officers basically not engaging, I haven't seen any evidence to suggest these people were, in a sense, like co-conspirators. That's not, I think, what happened here. You're really talking about a Capitol that was just underguarded, that was not prepared for this battle. But you've seen lots of footage that we've shown from the committee that there was really a hand-to-hand war that happened between the officers, and it was a very few isolated incidents of officers who basically chose not to engage. But I would not reach conclusions that suggest that was anything more than officers who were overrun and not prepared to respond.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And thank you so much again, Temidayo, for your time this morning. You have been so generous with your time and with the information that you shared with us this morning. And we are most grateful and delighted to have had you as a guest this morning.